At the cousin's party, my 7-year-old was mocked and excluded for being poor and having a lowly nurse for a mom. They made her sit next to the trash while everyone laughed. Then my husband's wealthy grandmother found out and announced this. Their faces lost all color. I was still in my scrubs in the hospital parking garage when Ethan called, wind muffling his voice like he'd stepped outside. "I'm outside Danielle's. Mason's birthday party," he said, and I could hear kid noise through the phone. Music, squeals, that bright kind of chaos. He sounded relieved. "I just got here. Stepped in for a second. Party's wrapping up. Everything looks fine." Then he lowered his voice like he was giving me a private update. "My mom's doing her host thing. Richard's grilling burgers. Danielle's acting normal." I smiled because normal was rare at that house in Greenwich, especially when money was involved. The one everyone called Danielle's because Ethan's sister and her family had been living there, though it was technically an old Johnson family place. "Put Ava on," I said. A pause. "Ava?" Ethan tried, cheerful. "Your mom wants to say hi." There was a soft rustle, then a tiny, careful, "Hi, Mom." No bounce, no story, no guess what. I heard Susan in the background, sweet as sugar, saying, "She had a wonderful time." Ethan chuckled like he believed it, and I let myself breathe out until I pictured my daughter's face and realized I couldn't hear her smile. "Love you," I said. "Love you too," she answered. And then she was quiet again. Ava didn't ask when I'd be home. Ava didn't ask about dinner. Ava didn't ask for anything. Ava didn't say a word more. When I got home, the house was lit up the way it is when someone's trying to make it feel normal. Ethan had already changed into sweats, and Ava was sitting on the couch with her shoes still on, hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for a teacher to call on her. "Hey, baby," I said, leaning in for a hug. She let me hug her, but her body stayed stiff like she was bracing. Ethan followed me into the kitchen and opened the fridge like that would explain everything. "She was just quiet in the car," he said. "Big party, lots of kids, you know. Probably overwhelmed." I glanced over his shoulder. Ava's eyes looked shiny, but she blinked hard, fast, like she could blink the wet away. "Did you have fun?" I asked her. She stared at the TV that wasn't on. "Yeah," she said. Then added, "It was fine." Ethan gave me a quick look. "See?" And I tried not to make a face. Fine was what adults said when they didn't want follow-up questions. I walked to the couch and crouched. "What was your favorite part?" I asked. Ava's lips parted, then she shut them and shrugged once. Ethan touched my shoulder. "Babe," he murmured, gentle. "Let her decompress." Ava nodded like she'd been trained to agree, and that's when my stomach tightened. Her voice was too flat. "I made spaghetti because it's the kind of dinner that fills the house with a smell that says you're safe here." We sat at the table, and Ethan tried to keep the mood light. "Did you see Mason's cake?" he asked. "It was huge. Danielle went all out for her son." Ava picked up one noodle, then set it down like she'd forgotten what mouths were for. I poured her water. "Eat a little," I said, careful. "You've got soccer tomorrow." She stared into the glass, unfocused. Ethan kept talking anyway, describing VR headsets and some fancy scavenger hunt Danielle had set up, like listing the activities would make Ava remember she'd enjoyed them. Ava didn't even roll her eyes. That was the part that scared me. "Ethan," I said quietly, when Ava slid her plate away untouched. "Are you sure nothing happened?" He frowned like I'd accused his family of a crime. "Lauren, I asked her, right when we left." He leaned toward Ava, still trying. "Right, honey? You're okay?" Ava nodded without looking at him. "See?" Ethan said, and he meant it. I watched my daughter's fingers twist the edge of her napkin into a tight little rope. "Ava," I said, "you can tell me anything." She didn't answer. She just kept twisting, tighter and tighter, like the napkin could hold her together. She slid her fork like it weighed a pound. After dinner, Ethan loaded the dishwasher with extra clanking, like noise could push the tension out of the room. I followed him, drying my hands on a towel. "What did your mom say?" I asked. "When you picked her up." Ethan didn't turn around. "The same thing she always says," he replied. "That everything was fine. That Ava did great with the cousins." He shut the dishwasher a little too hard, then tried again, softer. "Danielle said the kids were just doing their own thing. You know how it is." I stared at him. "And you believed them?" He finally looked at me, frustrated now. "Why wouldn't I? They were smiling. Ava said she was fine." He grabbed his phone off the counter like evidence. "I can call right now if you want." Before I could answer, he dialed Susan. She picked up on the second ring, voice bright. "Ethan? Sweetheart, everything okay?" Ethan put her on speaker. "Yeah, just checking," he said. "Ava seems quiet." Susan laughed softly. "Oh, honey, she's sensitive. She needs to learn social skills, that's all. The other kids were excited." She said it like a diagnosis. Ava was standing in the hallway, listening, her shoulders slightly hunched. Susan continued. "She's a wonderful girl, but she can't expect everyone to cater to her." Ethan murmured, "Okay," like he was absorbing it. I watched Ava's face go still, and something inside me clicked into place. The word fine started to sound like a weapon. Later, when I tucked Ava in, she kept her hands under the blanket like she didn't want them seen. Her nightlight threw soft stars on the wall, and I sat on the edge of the bed, brushing her hair back the way I've done since she was a baby. "Talk to me," I said. "Not to Dad. To me." Ava swallowed, and the sound was loud in the quiet room. She whispered, "Mom?" "Yeah." Her eyes darted to the door like someone might be listening. "Do I look—" She stopped, then forced it out. "Do I look poor?" My whole body went cold, then hot, then steady. "Why would you ask me that?" I said, keeping my voice calm on purpose. Ava's lower lip trembled, and she pressed it between her teeth hard. "Because—" She blinked fast. "Because Mason said I can't play his game because it's for, like, real people." I leaned closer. "Real people?" She nodded, barely. "And Addison said my shirt is from the cheap place." She said cheap, like it tasted bad. I slid off the bed onto my knees so we were eye to eye. "Ava," I said, slow, "you are not poor, and you never have to earn your place." She looked at me like she wanted to believe it but didn't know how. I sat down on the floor to be at her level. Once the first question cracked open, the rest rushed out like water finding a gap. Ava talked in small pieces, like she had to hand me each part carefully. "Their house was so big," she said, staring at her comforter. "And they had, like, 2 ladies setting up snacks." That tracked. Danielle loved a production. "They had those goggles," Ava said, "the ones that go on your face, and Mason told me I couldn't do it." I kept my face neutral. "What did he say exactly?" Ava swallowed. "He said, 'This isn't for you. You'll break it. It's expensive.'" Ethan had come into the doorway without me noticing, and I watched his jaw tighten. Ava kept going. "Then they all took turns and I sat there, and Mason said I could watch if I was quiet." "Where were the adults?" I asked. Ava lifted one shoulder. "They were talking. Dad wasn't there yet." She twisted her fingers together. "Addison, Danielle's daughter, laughed at my shoes. She said they look like school shoes. And one boy said, 'She's not from our level.'" Ethan made a small sound, like air escaping. Ava's eyes flicked to him, worried she'd get in trouble for telling. "You're not in trouble," Ethan said quickly, voice thick. Ava nodded, but her gaze dropped again. Mason had pointed at her shoes. Then Ava said the part that didn't belong in a kid's mouth. "They said you're a—" She hesitated. "Say it," I told her gently, even though my chest already knew. Ava whispered, "A lowly nurse." The phrase landed in the room like a slap. Ethan took a step forward. "Who said that?" he demanded, too sharp, and Ava flinched. I held up a hand toward him without looking away from her. "Ava," I said. "Was it a kid?" She nodded. "Addison said it first, then Mason said it like it was funny." She squeezed her eyes shut. "And they said Dad could have married someone better. Someone with money." Ethan's face went pale, then hard. Ava's voice got smaller. "They asked why Dad picked you if he wanted to be important." She opened her eyes again. "Mason and Addison told me not to tell you because you'd cry at work." I kept my breath even, one slow inhale, one slow exhale. "Did you tell anyone there?" I asked. Ava nodded once, almost relieved. "I told Grandma Susan." Ethan's shoulders lifted like he expected salvation in that sentence. Ava's next words took it away, words she shouldn't have had to know. Ava's eyes went glassy as she described walking up to Susan, the way she'd rehearsed being polite. "I said, 'Grandma, they won't let me play and they're being mean,' she told me. And she smiled like this." Ava forced her cheeks up in a fake grin that made my skin crawl. She said, "Oh, sweetie, you need better social skills." Ethan's mouth fell open. "She said that?" Ava nodded. "Then she said I was making it a big deal." Ava pulled the blanket up to her chin. "She told me to sit somewhere so I wouldn't be in the way." "Where?" I asked, already knowing it would be bad. Ava pointed with one finger, small and precise. "By the trash can, like where they put the bags." Ethan swore under his breath, quick and low. Ava whispered, "It was okay at first because I thought she'd come back." She blinked, and a tear finally slid down, slow. "But then everyone laughed because Mason said I was trash side." I reached out and wiped her cheek with my thumb, gentle. "Did Susan hear them?" I asked. Ava nodded. She said, "See? They're joking. Learn to take it." Ethan's hands clenched at his sides. Ava finished, voice barely there. "So I just sat there and waited for Dad to come and get me. When he finally arrived, I got up fast and went straight to him." I kissed her forehead, careful not to shake. I stood up and looked at Ethan, and my voice came out steady like a decision. "We're calling them. Tonight." And that's when I stopped being polite. Ethan paced the living room with his phone in hand like it was suddenly heavier. "Speaker," I said, sitting on the couch with Ava tucked against my side under a blanket. "They're not going to twist this into, he said, she said." Ethan nodded once and dialed Danielle first. She picked up with party energy still in her voice. "Hey, everything okay?" Ethan didn't warm up. "What happened today?" he asked. Danielle laughed like he'd made a joke. "What do you mean? Mason had a great time." Ethan's voice sharpened. "Did Ava get excluded from the VR game?" A pause, then a sigh. "Ethan, it's a kid party. The kids decide who plays. Ava is sensitive." I leaned forward. "Did you hear your daughter call me a lowly nurse?" I asked, calm. Danielle's tone turned icy. "Wow," she said. "So she told you that? That's dramatic." Ethan cut in. "Put Mom and Dad on." Danielle huffed, then I heard muffled movement. Susan came on, sweet again. "Ethan, honey." "Why did you put Ava next to the trash?" Ethan asked. Richard's voice jumped in, annoyed. "Because she was hovering. She needed direction." Susan added, "She needs social skills." Danielle, still on the line, chuckled, not even hiding it now. "Different levels," she said, like it explained everything. You should be grateful we include Ava at all. Danielle laughed. Actually, laughed. Ethan ended the call without a goodbye. He didn't throw the phone or slam anything. He just pressed the screen, went quiet, and stared at the wall like the paint might tell him he'd misheard. Ava had fallen asleep against me, her breathing soft and uneven, like she was still braced even in sleep. They said it like it was normal, Ethan murmured. His voice wasn't angry yet. It was stunned. He sat on the edge of the coffee table, elbows on knees. "My mom," he said, then stopped. He swallowed. "My mom heard someone call our kid trash side." He covered his mouth with his hand for a second, as if holding words in. I sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder, not trying to fix it. "You grew up in that," I said quietly. Ethan's eyes flicked toward me, quick, guilty. I thought it was just snob stuff," he said. "Like annoying comments. I didn't think it would touch Ava." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our dark yard like he needed distance to think. "My mom, Dad, and Danielle were comfortable," he said finally. "They weren't even trying to hide it." Then he turned back, and something in his posture changed. Less son, more father. "They don't get another chance," he said. He didn't defend them this time. Ethan's family always talked about his future like it was a stock they'd invested in. I'd been at dinners where Susan listed his grades like trophies, where Richard introduced him to strangers as our future doctor, before Ethan had even finished his undergrad. The night Ethan told them he was switching tracks, teaching, research, professor work, Susan's smile froze in place like plastic. "Teaching," she repeated, slow. Richard leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed. "You're throwing away your earning potential," he said, like Ethan had announced he'd quit working entirely. Danielle smirked into her wine. "That's cute," she said. "But you can do that after you make real money." Ethan tried to explain, patient, measured. "I like it," he said. "I'm good at it. I want a life." Susan's voice got soft, the way it did when she wanted control without sounding controlling. "Sweetheart, you can like lots of things," she said. "But this family has standards." Richard nodded once, firm. "Doctors," he said. "Executives. People who provide." Ethan's shoulders tensed, and I watched him press down his anger like he'd been trained to. "I provide," he said. Danielle laughed again, quick. "Not like you could," she replied. That's when I understood. They didn't see Ethan as a person making choices. They saw him as a return on investment. They acted like his life was a bad investment. I met Ethan in a fluorescent classroom, not at a gala or a country club. I was already a nurse, taking an advancement program on my days off because I wanted better shifts and more options. Ethan taught one of the modules, structured, clear, the kind of instructor who remembers your name and actually answers questions. The first time he spoke to me one-on-one, it was about coursework. "Your clinical examples are solid," he said, pointing at my paper. "But cite the protocol." That was it. No flirting. No blurred lines. After the program ended, I ran into him at a campus coffee cart, both of us reaching for the last blueberry muffin like it was a competition. He stepped back immediately. "You first," he said. I laughed. "I already passed," I told him. "You can stop being my professor now." He smiled, then got serious in a way I still respect. "I won't cross anything," he said, careful. "If you want to grab coffee sometime, it's after grades are final. Clean." That was Ethan. Rules mattered, integrity mattered, even when it cost him. We waited. We met as equals. We built something steady, slow, and when he finally brought me to meet his family, I walked in thinking manners would be enough. He waited until it was clean. The first time Susan asked what I did for work, she clasped her hands like she was delighted. "Lauren, tell me everything," she said, guiding me toward their kitchen like she was hosting a cooking show. "Ethan says you're in healthcare." "I'm a nurse," I said, simple. Susan's eyebrows lifted just slightly. "A nurse, huh?" she replied, smiling so wide it should have been friendly. Danielle appeared beside her with a glass of something expensive and looked me up and down, quick. "That's sweet," she said. Then the questions started, dressed up as curiosity. "Do you like bedside stuff?" Susan asked, like she meant cleaning. "Is it hard to be on your feet all day?" Danielle added, her voice dripping sympathy that didn't feel like sympathy. Richard chimed in from across the room. "Good work," he said, the way someone compliments a teenager's summer job. Ethan squeezed my hand, a quiet apology without words. I smiled back because that's what you do when you're trying to belong. But I heard the message under the smiles. I was acceptable, not impressive. A choice, not a catch. And from that day on, every conversation felt like a tally sheet. And they never stopped counting. Money wasn't just a topic in that family, it was the ruler they measured everyone with. At dinners, Danielle would casually mention our financial advisor the way other people mention the weather. Susan would talk about proper circles and keeping standards like she was protecting a bloodline. When Ethan got his first professor contract, he came home proud, waving the paper like a kid with an A. We went to share the news, thinking maybe they'd finally clap for him. Susan skimmed the number and sighed. "That's fine," she said, and the word hit again. Richard leaned in. "If you'd stayed medical," he said, tapping the page with one finger, "this would be 1 month." Danielle tilted her head. "Are you sure you want to be comfortable?" she asked Ethan, then glanced at me. "I mean, with the lifestyle you've chosen." I kept my face calm. Ethan's voice stayed level, but I saw the tension in his jaw. "I like my life," he said. Susan gave him that soft control smile. "Sweetheart," she murmured, "don't be stubborn. Do the real thing. Make real money." It wasn't advice, it was a correction. And standing in their spotless kitchen, I realized they weren't asking Ethan what made him happy. They were telling him what made him worthy. Everything had a price tag. Margaret, Ethan's grandmother and Ava's great-grandmother, was the only one who didn't talk to us like we were a bad decision. She lived in assisted living with a small patio garden she couldn't fully tend anymore, but she still tried. Ethan visited her the way some people go to church. Regular, respectful, no performance. Ava adored her because Margaret listened like every sentence mattered. Marisol, her caregiver, would greet us with a warm wave and a quiet update. "She's been waiting for you," she'd say, and Margaret would light up the second she saw Ethan. "There's my boy," she'd say, and she meant it, even though Ethan was a grown man with a career and a mortgage. Margaret would take my hand, squeeze it, and ask about my shifts without turning it into a status conversation. She'd ask Ava about school, and Ava would spill details like Margaret was a safe container. Meanwhile, Susan and Danielle treated Margaret like an inconvenience, something to manage, not someone to love. They rarely visited unless there was paperwork, a photo, a reason that looked good. Marisol once whispered to me, "They come for 15 minutes and leave her tired." Ethan stayed for an hour. Ava stayed close to Margaret's chair like it was home. Margaret remembered every detail about Ava. The morning after the speakerphone call, Ethan didn't rant. He didn't make speeches. He made lists. "No visits," he said, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open. "No calls, no texts, no FaceTimes, and they don't get access to Ava." I nodded once. "Agreed." He pulled up his phone and started blocking numbers. Susan, Richard, Danielle. One after another, clean and final. He went into Ava's tablet settings and removed shared family accounts Danielle had set up as a gift. He opened our calendar and deleted the upcoming Sunday dinner invite. Then he opened the Notes app and typed, "Steady. Boundary, no contact. If they show up, we don't open the door." He looked up at me like he needed to be sure I was with him. "They humiliated our kid," he said. "They don't get to negotiate." Ava padded into the kitchen in her pajamas, hair messy, eyes cautious. Ethan crouched. "You won't be alone with them again," he told her. Ava's shoulders dropped a fraction, like her body understood safety before her mind did. I watched Ethan press save on the note, then block on the last number. He didn't do it dramatically. He did it like he was closing a door. He hit block like he meant it. Their response came fast, and it wasn't remorse. Susan didn't call crying. Danielle didn't apologize. Richard didn't ask what Ava needed. Susan sent a text from a different number, as if that made it reasonable. "If you're going to be like this, fine. Don't come around then." Then 2 minutes later, another message. "You're overreacting. You'll calm down." Ethan stared at the screen, expression blank. Danielle's message followed, sharp. "You're letting Lauren run your life. It's embarrassing." Richard's was short. "Your choice." It read like a business email. "No, we're sorry. No, tell Ava we love her." Just cold acceptance. Because they assumed cold would work. My in-laws assumed Ethan would miss the perks, the big house, the status, the holiday photos that made them look like a perfect family. They assumed he'd crawl back. I looked at Ava playing quietly with a stuffed animal on the rug, still too careful, still too quiet. Ethan's hand hovered over the phone, then he set it down. My voice came out calm, not bitter. "We're done explaining," I said. Ethan nodded once, eyes steady. "We're done," he agreed. So I stopped negotiating. A week later, my phone started buzzing with names I barely spoke to. Aunt Janice, cousins, a family friend who always sent Christmas cards with glitter. The messages were all versions of the same script. "I heard there was a misunderstanding. Susan is beside herself. Danielle says Ava was having trouble fitting in." One text from Janice landed like a slap. "Honey, don't break up a family over kids being kids. Ethan needs to lead." Ethan read it over my shoulder and exhaled through his nose. "They're working the room," he said, and he wasn't impressed. He was tired. Then a group chat popped up that Ethan hadn't been in for years. "Johnson family updates." Someone had added us back like we were props. Danielle posted first. "Pray for our family. Some people are choosing drama." Susan followed with, "We love Ava no matter what." No mention of the trash. No mention of the words. Just a neat little narrative where we were emotional and they were gracious. Ethan didn't write an essay. He typed one message and sent it, factual. "Ava was excluded and insulted. Susan placed her by the trash. We are not discussing this further. Do not contact Lauren. Contact me for logistics only." Then he muted the chat. The silence after felt like air returning. Susan and Danielle went quiet, then went loud behind our backs. We went to see Margaret on a Saturday morning, bringing Ava's favorite library book because routines help when the world feels weird. The assisted living lobby smelled like lemon cleaner and someone's perfume, and Marisol met us with a tight smile that told me she'd been dealing with something. "She's in the garden room," Marisol said softly, then added, "And Susan's been calling the director all week. She called again this morning." Ethan stopped mid-step. "About what?" he asked. Marisol lowered her voice. "She asked to change the visitor list. Said you were upsetting Margaret." Ethan's eyes flashed, but he kept his tone controlled. "Did she do it?" Marisol shook her head. "Margaret told the director, 'If my grandson can't visit, I won't participate in anything.' She said it with a hint of pride. Ava's hand tightened around mine. We walked into the garden room, and Margaret looked up from her chair like she'd been waiting for a cue. "There's my girl," she said to Ava first, not Ethan. Ava gave a small smile, then tucked closer to my side. Margaret's gaze sharpened. She'd always had that ability to see what people tried to hide. "Ava," she said gently, "you're quieter than usual." Ava shrugged. Margaret didn't let it go. "Did someone hurt your feelings?" she asked, direct but soft. Ava's eyes flicked to me, asking permission. I nodded once. Margaret didn't let fine pass. Ava sat on the footstool in front of Margaret's chair, knees pressed together, the picture of a kid trying to be small. Margaret leaned forward, hands resting on her cane. She could manage a few steps with it, but outings meant the wheelchair. "Tell me," she said. "Not what you think I want to hear. What happened?" Ava's voice trembled at first, then steadied as she repeated the pieces that had lodged in her mind. "They wouldn't let me play," she said. "They said I was poor." Margaret's face didn't change, but the room felt like it tightened. Ava continued. "They said my mom is a lowly nurse." The exact phrase again, crisp and ugly. Ethan's hands curled into fists, then unclenched on his knees. Ava looked down. "And Grandma Susan told me to sit by the trash. Like, next to it." I added the part Ava hadn't. The laughter, the trash side. The way the adults minimized it. Ethan filled in the speakerphone call, brief and precise. Margaret lifted her teacup, then stopped halfway, eyes fixed on the wall as if she was watching a memory play. "Who?" she asked, voice low. "Where? When?" We answered, one by one. Marisol stood behind Margaret's chair, jaw tight. Margaret set the cup down without taking a sip. She didn't gasp. She didn't lecture. She just went still in a way that made the whole room pay attention. Her teacup stopped halfway to her lips. Margaret looked at Ava like Ava was the only person in the room. "You are not trash," she said, firm. "And your mother's work is honorable." Ava's shoulders lifted like she was trying not to cry again. Margaret reached out and patted Ava's hand once, then turned to Ethan. "They did this in my house?" she asked. "In the house I've kept in this family's name all these years?" Ethan hesitated. "It's the Greenwich house. Danielle's been living there and hosting, and Mom and Dad act like they own it," he started, reflexive. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "No," she said, and the single word sliced through the habit of calling it theirs. She shifted her gaze to me. "Lauren," she said, "when is the annual reunion?" I blinked. "Next weekend," I answered. Margaret nodded as if she'd just confirmed a meeting time. "Good," she said. Then she glanced at Marisol. "Call Mr. Whitaker," she instructed, like she was ordering tea. Marisol didn't ask why. She just pulled out her phone. Ethan leaned forward, confused. "Grandma." Margaret cut him off, not unkindly. "You three are coming," she said. "And you are bringing me." Ethan stared. "They won't want—" "I don't care what they want," Margaret replied, voice calm. "They've been comfortable too long." She tapped her cane once. "I'm not sending you in alone." She looked at me again, eyes sharp but warm. "Keep Ava close," she said. "No wandering." Then she added, quieter, "They will learn what manners actually are." She said it like a decision already made. We weren't coming to reconcile. We came because Margaret asked, and we planned to leave the moment she was done. The reunion was at the same Greenwich house, the one with the long driveway and the landscaping that looked like a magazine cover. I wore a simple dress, nothing flashy, nothing apologetic, and I kept Ava's hand in mine from the second we stepped out of the car. Inside, the house smelled like expensive candles and catered food. Susan swept toward us with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ava!" she sang, arms open like last weekend hadn't happened. Ava's fingers dug into my palm. I stepped slightly in front of her without making a scene. "Hello, Susan," I said. Ethan nodded once, stiff. Danielle floated over, perfect hair, perfect nails. "We're so glad you came," she said, and her eyes flicked to Ava's shoes. "Kids' table is in the sunroom," she added quickly, already trying to direct. "She'll have fun." "She'll stay with us," I said, still calm. Danielle's smile tightened. Richard approached, shaking hands with someone else, then glanced at Ethan like Ethan was a colleague who'd disappointed him. "Glad you could make it," he said, flat. The room buzzed with cousins and aunts, people pretending not to stare. Ava stayed pressed against my hip like a shadow. Then the front door opened again, and the whole sound of the house shifted. Marisol came in first, purposeful, and behind her was Margaret in a sleek wheelchair, posture straight, eyes bright. Conversations stumbled. Forks paused midair. Susan's smile faltered like someone had cut a string. The room changed temperature. Susan rushed forward, hands fluttering. "Mother, what a surprise," she said, too loud. Margaret didn't match her energy. "Susan," she replied, like they were at a bank. Danielle appeared beside Susan, leaning in with that performative concern. "Grandma Margaret, you should rest," she cooed. "This is a lot." Margaret's gaze slid over Danielle without stopping. Ethan stood beside me, shoulders squared, and Ava tucked herself behind my arm, peeking out. Susan tried again, turning to me with a smile she probably practiced in a mirror. "Lauren," she said, "we can talk like adults. We're family." I held her gaze. "We are talking like adults," I answered. Danielle laughed softly. "We all make choices," she said, eyes on my hands like she wanted to see a wedding ring worth judging. "Some choices come with limitations," Susan added. "We just want what's best. Proper influences." Ava's grip tightened, and I felt her flinch at proper, like she knew it was code. I bent slightly, whispering to Ava, "Stay with me." Richard murmured to Ethan, "You could have had more," like it was advice and not an insult. Ethan's face stayed still, but his eyes hardened. Margaret watched the little digs land, one after another, like she was counting them. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't ask for attention. She simply rolled forward a few feet, and the room made a path without meaning to. Danielle opened her mouth again, but Margaret lifted one hand, palm down. The talking stopped. Then Margaret rolled forward. Margaret didn't start with money. She started with Ava. "A child was humiliated in this house," she said, voice steady enough to carry without effort. "Mocked. Excluded. Placed beside the trash as if she belonged there." Susan's face snapped toward Ethan like she wanted him to stop this, and Richard's jaw clenched. Margaret continued, eyes scanning the room. Then adults hid behind the words social skills and levels, as if cruelty becomes acceptable when it's dressed nicely. Danielle gave a sharp laugh, forced. "That's not—" Margaret didn't look at her. "It is exactly that," she said. "And it's not new." She shifted her gaze to Susan and Richard. "You have treated Ethan like a project," she said, "and Lauren like a mistake. You have treated kindness like weakness and money like character." The room was so quiet I could hear Ava breathing. Margaret gestured to the man standing near the doorway in a suit I hadn't seen enter. "Mr. Whitaker," she said. He stepped forward from where he'd been waiting quietly near the doorway, holding a folder. Susan's voice went thin. "Mother, what is this?" Susan had treated this house like it already belonged to her for years. Mr. Whitaker opened the folder calmly. "Margaret Johnson's property," he said, professional. "Including this residence, is owned by Margaret Johnson. A trust transfer has been executed. Ownership is effective immediately, and the home is held in trust for Ethan Johnson and Ava Johnson and any future children." Danielle's face drained. Richard took a half step back like the floor shifted. Mr. Whitaker continued, "Susan Johnson, Richard Johnson, and Danielle Johnson are excluded as beneficiaries of this asset. Formal notice to vacate will be served to the current occupants of this residence. Going forward, Susan and Richard Johnson have no authority to host events here or represent this home as theirs." Susan made a sound like she'd been punched, but no one touched her. Danielle's hands flew to her mouth. "That's impossible," she whispered. Margaret didn't argue. She simply reached for Ethan's arm, and Ethan offered it without hesitation. I tucked Ava in close, her head against my side, and we walked out through the stunned silence, past the perfect candles and the catered trays. Outside, the air felt cleaner. In the weeks that followed, Danielle and her family moved out, their image suddenly missing its foundation, and the relatives who'd texted me misunderstanding went quiet when the truth had a deed attached. Ava started eating dinner again. She started laughing again, and the rule in our house became simple. No one gets access to our child if they can't show basic respect. If you were in my place, what boundary would you set first? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.